Hello everyone. I am Shifali Rawat Agarwal, Ehsaas Woman, Calcutta. Welcome you all to a fascinating afternoon dedicated to English literature. I welcome you to an author's afternoon, a literary landmark in the city of culture and joy, in association with Taj Bengal and My Calcutta. Prabha Ketan Foundation needs no introduction when it comes to encourage and widen the reach and readership of English literature in India and abroad. The aim to elevate literary experiences has always been the top priority of the foundation. As a Calcutta-based non-profit trust established by a literature and cultural aficionado, late Dr. Prabha Ketan, the foundation enjoys the highest recognition and reputation in literary, cultural, social empowerment, and social welfare initiatives. Prabha Ketan Foundation has been actively encouraging literary and cultural experiences on the national and global frontiers. Every initiative of the foundation presented by patron Shree Cement Limited is bolstered by the support and cooperation of distinguished associates, partners, collaborators, and Ehsaas Women of India. The hallmark of the organization is its earnest effort to create a cultural capital and work as a cultural ambassador. The foundation is a staunch supporter of UNESCO's views that cultural development has the potential to be an alternative way of promoting sustainable development in poor rural communities, especially in the third world countries. To widen the cultural spectrum, Prabha Ketan Foundation has implemented the best strategies possible, right from promoting local food at destination venues to exchanging cross-city mementos. The foundation leaves no stones unturned to treat chief guests and audience to the taste of authentic local cuisines and appreciate handloom and sculptural work of local artisans when it times to show appreciation to the esteemed personalities. The anthem of Prabha Ketan Foundation deserves a special mention here. The anthem portrays the beautiful philosophy of the nation, unity in diversity. It's my pleasure to welcome you once again to yet another episode of An Author's Afternoon. Indeed, it is a stellar initiative implemented by Prabha Ketan Foundation as it gives us all a chance to rejoice in literature. Amazing series of enchanting afternoons is on a roll as we have eminent author Chandrachur Ghose, who is all about untold stories of an inconvenient nationalist, who is none other than our very own Netaji. Mr. Ghose is an author, researcher, and commentator on history, economics, and environment. Graduated from Visva and University of Sussex, his works include his latest biographic creation, Bose, The Untold Story of an Inconvenient Nationalist, published by Penguin Random House, and his co-authored book, Conundrum, Subhas Bose's Life After Death. Excuse me if I've pronounced it wrong. After working at the Center of Science and Environment, an International Market Assessment Private Limited, he switched his focus on being an independent author and columnist. He is currently based in Hyderabad. Ghose is one of the founder of the pressure group Mission Netaji that has been the moving force behind the declassification of secret documents related to Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. The activism of Mission Netaji led to the declassification of over 10,000 pages in 2010 and subsequently declassification of over 300 files by the central government and government of West Bengal. In conversation with the national best-selling author, we have Ms. Maua Chatterjee, who is an educationist. It's sure going to be an engaging session as the author will share thoughts and opinions of Subhas Chandra Bose about the development of independent India, communalism, geopolitics, and political ideology. Enjoy the session with Mr. Chandrachur Ghose and take a peek into the life of an unconventional leader. The beloved Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. So let's get started. Over to you both.
Well, Chandrachur. So let me begin by asking you about your journey as a writer. So what made you take up writing, or what were the influences that shaped you into being the writer that you are, or how do you see yourself as a writer evolving over the years?
Thank you, Mohua. And first of all, thanks to Prabhakaitan Foundation. Anindita, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure and talking to informed and interested readers, which is a rarity these days. And well, to answer your question, Mohua, I mean, writing, I never thought that I would take up writing as a career because we all know how we grow up with the aspirations that we have. You have to be either an engineer or a doctor or something of our generation, particularly. But it is something that I guess has been in my DNA. Because as far as I am aware, the things that shaped my personality or attitude towards reading is my grandfather was a freedom fighter. He had joined Deshbandhu Chittaranjan Das as a young student and had gone to jail at the age of 16. And then he became sort of an icon in the family. He became a top lawyer and a member of parliament from Bardhaman. My father was a journalist. He was a reporter with The Statesman. So reading and writing. I have grown up with books all around me. And so reading was the primary interest. But after that, expressing yourself. I guess, one thing which I very clearly remember that I have been an introvert, a very shy kid. So speaking was never my forte. It was expressing myself was more through writing. And when I began my professional journey, it was also more focused on writing. As a researcher, I have been an environmentalist by training, then business consulting. So all this involved a tremendous amount of writing. That's all I have been doing in my career. But then there is writing for your profession, and then there is writing for something that deeply interests you and drives you. So I guess I decided that it is something that I needed to do about a decade ago when I started writing this book. This book I started writing in around 2010-11, and then dropped it because I got sucked into other matters and other things that came up. And before this book came, my unplanned book, which was Conundrum. Before this, me and my friend Anuzar, we wrote together, and based on which the movie Gumnami was made by Srijit Mukherjee. And but then this is something that I had to do because one thing, like most Bengali kids, I have also grown up in the ambience where Netaji is revered, he is idolized, and there is a lot of hero worship about him. So, and on the other hand, I also saw people who equally demonized him. So it was a black and white divide. Some people completely worshipping him, and some people just, finding him very unacceptable because of his political stance, because of his ideology, or some of his actions. So I had to find out something, the truth, really, moving away from these two positions. And all the books that I read about Netaji, they told me a lot, they gave me a lot of information, but never really gave me the flavor of the person. These books, they are written by some big names, some big historians, and contain a lot of information, very well researched, but they are written in a style, I felt, that was my feeling as a reader, that they are written in a style of resume, a CV, that Subhas Chandra Bose was born in Cuttack, he came to Calcutta for studying, went to UK, quit ICS, came back to India and joined the freedom movement. He joined the Congress, then became president, was exiled, and then left India, formed two governments in exile, and then he disappeared. So that's a story practically everybody knows. But does that really give us the feel of the man that he was? And with, literally a pantheon of freedom fighters, nationalist leaders of that time. I mean, we are talking about Mahatma Gandhi, we are talking about Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel. I mean, they are the titans of the freedom struggle. So where do we place Subhas Bose amongst this pantheon, amongst all these leaders? What is unique about him? What differentiates him? Was he right? Was he wrong? And why is Subhas Bose missing from the political discourse of free India? So all these questions were bothering me for a long period of time. And in 2004, a few of us, a few friends, young friends, and I was a lot younger, 18 years ago, I was a lot younger then, and we decided that we needed to find out the answer to the question of what happened to Netaji. His disappearance was something that has bothered generations of Indians, and nobody has been able to establish conclusively what happened to him, whether he died in the plane crash or whether he survived, and if he survived, what happened to him. And when we started this journey of finding the answer, then I realized that his life and activities was no less mysterious than his so-called disappearance. So that's when I discovered there is a whole lot of stories about this man which have not been brought forth. Either they remained hidden, or they remained untold. So they had to be all brought forward, and then I saw that these stories portray this man in a more complete manner. Then you get to feel in flesh and blood the man right in front of you, standing in front of you, and what he's trying to think, which way he's trying to go. A very impatient young man developing into a statesman. That journey from a kid to statesman, global statesman, that journey had to be captured, and every stage he's evolving. That story I wanted to bring forth. So that's how we came here.
Okay. So did you have a specific storyboard in mind? I mean, we've just heard about your endeavors in, getting quite a bit of material declassified by the government. So it is Mission Netaji, yeah. I think, so that you all are working towards. So did that, those files and the material that was released then, did that help you in doing up this book, in writing this book? Was there a certain focus that you had when you were, writing? Like, what is the focus of this particular book? Because you have co-authored Conundrum with Anuj Thad before this, which also deals with Netaji. Yeah. So how is this book different from the one earlier?
Okay. Now, I will give you one small statistic which will tell you how much we know about Netaji. So, Subhash Chandra Bose's active political life, public life, if we consider, is from 1921 to 1945, roughly say about 25 years. So, if we measure the productivity output of the three main leaders of the freedom struggle, Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Subhash Chandra Bose, by the number of pages in their printed works, collected works, it will tell you a lot. The number of printed pages for these 25 years for Mahatma Gandhi is more than 30,000. For Pandit Nehru, it is more than 10,000. Any guess what Netaji's number of printed pages for these 25 years is? It's just over 3,000. So 1/10 of Mahatma, 1/3 of Panditji. Certainly, Subhas Bose was not writing or speaking less. He was an extremely busy and extremely productive politician, a very erudite person, one of the most well-read personalities of those days. And he was writing and reading vociferously. He was writing letters, he was writing papers and political position papers, briefing papers. And so the question really that troubled me is, where have all those works gone? And then we discovered another, that fact that struck us when we started our campaign for transparency. Transparency in the sense political and historical. That 10,000 pages for the first time came into the public domain in 2010. And thereafter, 5 years later, 300 files were declassified. That tells you how much of secrecy had been maintained at the official level regarding a man who is considered dead and gone in 1945. That's 80 years ago. So that is, a huge amount of information. So we had to go through all those papers. We had to read through the pages, page after page, file after file. And the real Subhas Bose started emerging from those pages. Stories that were not known, stories that were not told. Because one good thing about these files are a lot of first-hand accounts by people who worked with Netaji, who worked with Subhas Bose, and had seen things happening in front of them. And since they had worked with Subhas Bose, they could tell their own stories, and a lot of new stuff was coming out different from the traditional biographies that we have been reading from. His first biography came out, believe it or not, in 1927 when he was just 30 years old, and he was a hero because he had been sent to the Burmese prisons, and he came back very unwell with tuberculosis and took a lot of time to recover. So that's when his first biography came out. But the first proper, well-researched biography came surprisingly again from the opponent camp, from a British intelligence agent, Hugh Toy. Hugh Toy's primary identity in this context is that he was given the charge to find out what happened to Netaji. So he was chasing Subhas Bose. Has he escaped? If he has escaped, where has he gone? Is he really dead? So Hugh Toy was given the charge to find out the truth. And while chasing Subhas Bose, he actually fell in love with the man. And he wrote the biography, which is, of course, coming from a British intelligence agent, it is critical in many aspects, but there is an undertone of admiration. And it received a lot of critical reviews, of scathing criticism in the Western media, because by that time an image had been created. I will come to the image aspect of Subhas Bose a little later. But starting from that first biography, proper biography of Hugh Toy, till we have a few ones in the recent years, they had not been able to utilize this information that was there. So it was very important, very, very important to bring these aspects out. And that is, we asked about the storyboard. The storyboard, as there was no preconceived idea. There was nothing that, it was a journey of discovery for us also, for me also. So as I went reading, as I went going through the files and the documents, I kept discovering Subhas Bose for myself. And it differed a lot from the conventional image that has been built about him. I mean, even now when we think about Subhash Chandra Bose, when we think about Netaji, when we talk about him, the first image that comes to us is one of the worst statues ever in the world. That is the Shamajar 5-point crossing statue. So that image, I wanted to break that image. I wanted to bring out, because Subhas Bose is not a horse-riding, saber-rattling personality. He's much, much more than that. So the images had to be broken, symbols had to be broken. That was the only aim.
Okay. So coming back to the title, you have called it The Untold Story of an Inconvenient Nationalist. So if you would like to elaborate on that inconvenient nationalist part.
Okay. I mean, this is a very, very tricky question, and sorry. I knew that this part would create a lot of controversy and questions. And inconvenient, why inconvenient? Part of the answer to your question lies in the fact that the declassification happened in 2010 and in 2015 and 16, and not before. Even the INF files were declassified in 1997-98. So before 1997-98, actually, information about Subhas Bose was very little in the public domain. And other than books and personal accounts, there was very little official archival material. So why is that? And even if you follow the political discourse of our country, in the mainstream political discourse, you will find the discussion of the ideas of Pandit Nehru, of course of Mahatma Gandhi, Ram Manohar Lohia, Jayaprakash Narayan, Baba Saheb Ambedkar, but Subhas Bose is missing. And that is very surprising because Subhas Bose was one of the leading thinkers of his time. He was, as I said, a scholar, an erudite person, and a thinker. He was writing, he was thinking about political principles, not only about political strategies, but political principles, and he was framing his own ideas. So why is Subhas Bose missing in the mainstream discussion in free India, where we had so many problems like literacy, health, communalism, and all these are issues where Subhas Bose had taken a lot of interest and had done things rather than being a political preacher or a theorist. He had shown by doing things, shown the way. So that tells you why Subhas Bose is an inconvenient nationalist. No, why inconvenient? From the very beginning, Subhas Bose was associated with the revolutionary circles in Bengal. And the revolutionary groups in Bengal were anything but Gandhian. So, from the very beginning of his political career, he started throwing challenge to the Gandhian leadership. And that was not taken well. And it was not a one-off challenge. It was not just a debate. They differed on fundamentals, the very basics. They differed on the very basics. And after some toleration, Gandhiji found it very irksome. He was annoyed. And when the way the Congress organization, the leadership was at that time, if Gandhiji was annoyed by something, his associates would be annoyed 10 times more. So they were more annoyed with Subhas. And the final break came in 1939 when Subhas was thrown out of Congress and he formed his own political outfit. By that time, his relation with the Congress and the Gandhian leadership was extremely bitter, and they had kind of put him away. So that story is more or less well known. What is not known so much is his relation with the other political formations. So, for example, with the communists, he had kind of off and on good and bad relationships. So when the communist initially, when the Communist Party was formed, the leadership of the then Communist Party of India, for example, Manavendranath Roy, he was very fond of Subhas, and he gave him all the support, extended all the support, and kind of took his support also. So they were working in collaboration. There was a large amount of collaboration between them. They did not have to subscribe to each other's views, but strategically, tactically, they were working together. But then again, Subhas started talking too radical even for the communists, and later on documents show that the communist leaders were worried that Subhas was eating into their constituency. So the labor, the student, all these constituencies, they were worried that Subhas was getting those constituencies away from them. So they were not at all happy with that. And later on, when Subhas formed his own political outfit, Forward Bloc, they refused to join the Forward Bloc. So Subhas had to form a platform called Left Consolidation Committee, where they would stay together, discuss, and do things together. But even that did not last. And when he went out of India, when he joined the Axis Bloc, then it reached the peak of bitterness, and the Communist Party, the communist leaders of that time, called him all sorts of names. The running dog of Japanese imperialism, and they showed him as a donkey, Tojo riding the donkey with the face of Subhas Bose, Tojo going for a walk with a dog on the leash, and the dog had Subhas Bose's face. And so he was shown as an aggressor, as a despot, and who wanted to take over India on behalf of the Axis powers. So that was the clean break. That is what happened during the Second World War. With the Congress Socialist Party, the party of Ramana Lohia and Jayaprakash Narayan, in principle, they were in alignment with Subhash, but they also refused to come on board with him. And something curious happened, that when the Congress Socialist Party leadership said that, no, we are not going with you, our paths are different, the Congress Socialist Party split, because the workers and the mid-level leaders, they all came over to Subhash, and the leaders were left alone. And but finally, what happened is Jayaprakash Narayan understood that he was on the wrong side. I mean, he misunderstood Subhash or underestimated Subhash, and he wrote a secret letter to Subhash saying that, I mean, you have been right all the time, and I know the decisions that we have taken have not been correct, so let's now work together. But the time when he wrote that letter was too late. Subhash was on the verge of leaving the country, leaving India. So that didn't lead to anything else. But that was, again, there was a misunderstanding. There was not only misunderstanding, but there were ideological gaps and all. So the Congress Socialist Party was also not completely with him, although in principle they agreed on a lot of matters. But they were very worried that Subhash was breaking Congress, and they didn't want to part ways with Gandhiji. So they wouldn't come over. The communal organizations, for example, Muslim League. Subhash was very much against communal politics and against Muslim leagues. But he refused to see Muslim League or the Hindu Mahasabha as completely communal organizations. He looked at the different leaders. So he considered that the Muslim League and the Hindu Mahasabha had progressive elements, progressive leaders amongst them. He wanted to get them on board with him on the same platform when he was building a forward bloc. So with that aim, he formed an alliance first with Hindu Mahasabha, which did not work. It split, so they parted ways. Hindu Mahasabha had a lot of grudge against him for that politically. Savarkar and Subhas Bose were never on the same side in terms of political thinking and program, and Subhas was actually quite disappointed with Savarkar. And but having said that, all the leaders of the Hindu Mahasabha, from Savarkar to Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, they had huge amount of respect, and they never spoke ill about him. They never spoke ill about him. Even, I mean, this is very striking that when Subhash left India, he went abroad. Savarkar was one of the first persons to state publicly that wherever he is, the best wishes of millions of his countrymen are with him, and may he succeed in his endeavors. So, I mean, that coming from a staunch political opponent says a lot about the relationship that they shared. And even when Shyama Prasad wrote his diaries, and which were published later and all, he was critical on many grounds, but and particularly on communal grounds. But as an individual, as a leader, there was no doubt in how high esteem they held him. They held Subhash. Now, after the alliance with Hindu Mahasabha broke, Subhash formed an alliance in the Calcutta corporation election with the Hindu Mahasabha, with the Muslim League, and he said that Muslim League is also a communal organization, but for the improvement of the city, betterment of the city, and to prevent them from going completely communal and break off, we need to bring the progressive members, progressive elements of the Muslim League into the mainstream politics. So that was always his idea, always the goal that he was striving for. And obviously, I mean, it was not always reciprocated, because the Muslim League also had their own ideas. And a very interesting letter written by the governor of Bengal of those days to the viceroy tells what the inner politics was going on at that time. The governor of Bengal wrote to the viceroy that the Muslim League leaders are elated that they have got Subhas Bose within their grips, but they have no idea what a slippery politician he is, and for all you know, he might end up breaking Muslim League. So, I mean, that was these are the different points of view, you know. I mean, and they need to be told, because everything is not in black and white, that he is this and he is that. So, but my main point in telling you all these relations is that there was not a single political group who completely identified Subhash with them, or who completely identified themselves with Subhash. Subhash's immense popularity and the public adulation and the admiration, nobody could ignore Subhash. he had to be there. He was always there. Even when unwanted, he was always there. He had to be taken into account. But so then he could not be ignored. But he could not be, adopted, assimilated also. So there is always a dilemma in whichever party forms the government, whichever leaders come to power. There is a dilemma. Subhas is never brought into the mainstream, because if he's brought into the mainstream, then a lot of aspects come in front which are not very palatable for the political groups, for these political formations. So even while paying lip service, even while showing their respect through programs and ceremonial stuff like releasing postage stamps or organizing a function in the Red Fort, he was never rehabilitated or reinstalled to the place which he deserved. And probably that is for the first time that is happening now, when his statue is going to be set up near the India Gate, because that is symbolically a huge statement. It shows that at the heart of the capital, you are putting him there. So, that's giving him his due. But till now, what has happened is even now, when, for example, Subhas Bose has been the icon, one of the icons of the left front who ruled here. But even when you read their writings, analytical essays and everything, they say that, Subhas is a great man, a great leader, a great leftist and all this. But there is always a but at the end. But, he went over to the Axis power. So that would stop them. So that but is there for every political formation, which made him an inconvenient nationalist for all of them.
Two other political figures around that time had, what should I say, a bittersweet relationship with Subhash, one being Nehru and the other Jinnah. So if you could, share your thoughts about that.
More than Jinnah, perhaps I would say it was Gandhiji, because with Jinnah there was not so much of a working relationship. He tried as Congress president, and otherwise even after quitting Congress he tried to show reason to Jinnah, but he couldn't. And Subhas was extremely bitter about Jinnah and with his Pakistan idea of Pakistan, and the way he was depending on the British Raj to gain acceptance of his ideas of Pakistan and dividing the country. He was extremely annoyed, and even when he was in Southeast Asia, he kept, through his broadcasts, he kept appealing that don't do this. But today or tomorrow, India will be free. But then the people will never forget that you betrayed them, you divided the country on the basis of communal lines and all, so which are completely unacceptable. So he argued completely against it, and he also was pretty vocal and outspoken about the Muslim League and Jinnah. He said that they are stooges of the British Raj, and they are the party of capitalists and zamindars, and they're lackeys of the British imperialism. So he was pretty vocal and used very strong language about them. But his defining or deciding relationships were really with Gandhiji, Sardar Patel and Nehru, more than probably anybody else. With Pandit Nehru, he was intellectually closer to Pandit Nehru than with probably anybody else. The main difference that happened with him, with his main allegation against Pandit Nehru, was that although Pandit Nehru in principle agreed with him on the political programs and other issues, at the end, when it came to take a decision, when it came to take a side, Pandit Nehru would always, despite his disagreements, go over to Gandhiji. And that kind of rankled him a lot. He said, that's something that he could never digest. And he said that when he had to quit the Congress presidentship in 1939, he wrote to one of his nephews that nobody has done so much damage to me personally than Pandit Nehru. With Mahatma Gandhi, his disagreements were much more fundamental, because the two men were very, very different. I mean, two men perhaps cannot be more different than Gandhiji and Bose. So he had a lot of respect, individual respect for Gandhiji. He looked up to him, always wanted to win his approval. That's a dichotomy, I mean, that's a very curious thing, bizarre thing rather, that while he was criticizing Gandhiji all the time, and he was against Gandhiji's go slow program, moderation program, Gandhiji's approach of discussing and, moderating down the tempers, he also at the same time was trying to win his approval, that Gandhiji should accept his program. So that also held him back from going full throttle till the very end when it was too late. And these things continue. And Pandit Nehru, towards the fag end of his life, when he was talking to one of a foreign journalist, wife of a former ICS officer, a British ICS officer, he admitted in as many words that I did let down Subhas, because more often than not I agreed with his proposals, with his programs, but for me Gandhiji was India. So I could not ever think of moving away from Gandhiji. So even when I agreed probably all the time with Subhas, I never sided with him. So in a sense, I did let him down. So those are his words, not mine.
Moving away, you have this chapter called Covert Operative. So Bose was very good at covert operation and spycraft. In fact, his escape from Kolkata is shrouded in mystery. So would you like to, elaborate on that?
That spycraft thing was a central element of the revolutionary groups in Bengal, and that's how they operated. When they planned an operation, it was decentralized. Responsibilities were delegated to different people, in a manner that one person wouldn't know what the other person is doing, or what the ultimate goal of the project is. So if they have to rob arms and ammunition, so the line of command would be prepared in a way that the work would move smoothly. But if 10 people are involved in that, none of those 10 people would know what the other 9 people are going to do, or what their roles and responsibilities, and in many cases they wouldn't even know the identities of the other 9 men. So from a student days in Kolkata, Subhas got involved with these revolutionary groups. He was not active, but his friend circle was mostly from these groups, and he was learning. He was picking up the art of spycraft, the art of covert operation, how to plan, how to execute, and he was a very attentive student. If nothing else, he was a great student. So he picked up all these things, and completely all the time he implemented those. And if the British government was spying upon him, he was spying on the British government. Let me tell you the story. In 1938, Subhas Bose was joined by a young Bengali fellow who joined him as a private secretary. Now, this young Bengali fellow used to be a jailer in one of the prisons in Bengal, and he was thrown out of his job. Why was he thrown out of his job? Because the government found out this jailer was employed by the revolutionaries to supply information from inside to outside and outside to inside. So, I mean, Subhas had these kind of networks within the government. The night before he disappeared, 2 nights before he disappeared from his house, he got the file which was maintained by the police, Calcutta police, on him. He got it smuggled out of the police station to home, sat through the night, read the full file. He knew exactly what the police was thinking about him, who were the agents keeping surveillance on him. He was informed. So he had the resources to get a file from the police station out, sat through the night. Early in the morning, the file was returned, placed from where it was taken. Nobody knew anything. So that was the capability of a man. And this man was completely surrounded by spies all the time. So by the time, this is so shocking, it came to me as a shock, that when he was planning his books while in exile in Europe, The Indian Struggle and later An Indian Pilgrim, the moment he writes the structure of the book, the contents of the book in detail, and before sending to the publisher, it goes to the British government. So somebody very close to him is spying on him while he's in exile in Europe. So it's a cat and mouse game going on here and there continuously. So that's a fascinating episode. I mean, that No other leader had that kind of resources or capability of hoodwinking the British government the way Subhash did.
So again, the other chapter called The Quagmire of Isms, and I quote from there, Netaji has been described as a Nazi sympathizer with authoritarian ambition by the Western press, also as, like you mentioned earlier, running dog of Jap fascism. So what would be your comments on that?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, one of the characteristic traits of us Indians, and I include myself in that, is that we look for approval and certification from the Western world. So when the World War was going on and Subhash went over to the Axis powers and threw the actual challenge to the British Empire, the Western media took the charge of maligning him, of showing him in a very negative light. And that till date has continued. So much so that in 2019, an aide to a US Congresswoman during press briefing wore a t-shirt which had Netaji's photo on the front. And there was a media furor in the US saying that this man, US Congresswoman's aide, is wearing the face of a Nazi sympathizer. That is in 2019. So that's the image. So in the very beginning, I told you that Subhas Bose has been relegated to images. So the is coming the shining knight on a white horse, holding a sword. He will liberate the country against non-violence. So he's a violent person. So that's one symbol within the country, which is as erroneous as the symbol that has been created. And this was created way back during the Second World War, and has the government of India unfortunately has done nothing to demolish this symbol, that he was a Nazi collaborator, a fascist collaborator, and an authoritarian person. Subhas, actually, if you look at his political life, his political discourse, you will see he referred more to Irish nationalism and Irish struggle against Britain than he ever did about the Germans or Italians or the Japanese. It was something that he adopted as a tactical measure, because his in 1938 when he became the president of the Congress, he enunciated his principle that we don't have to bother about what is going on inside other countries. That is not our job. Our primary goal is to win independence for India. We have to become free. That is our primary goal. Then we think about humanity. Then we think about what other countries are doing inside their countries. We are not moral preachers that we will go telling people that you should do this. This is how you should run your country. That's none of our business. India should think about herself first. And how far-sighted he was, this is one slogan which came back in 2014 elections, parliamentary elections, India first, when Narendra Modi made this his slogan, India first. And this was Subhas Bose's statement in 1939, that India must think of herself first. And that's what he did. He was extremely critical of the Nazi party. He represented the Indian students while in Germany. While in Germany talking with the Nazi officials, he criticized them on their face. He wrote to them in very strong language, critical letters. And I mean, he even called Hitler a German version of Fakir of EP, who was an eccentric Northwest Frontier province tribal leader. And according to one version, when he met Hitler and was having a discussion with him about what is to be done in the next phase of Indian freedom struggle, according to one version, Hitler was lecturing him on what India should do and what India is, how India is poised. Subhas told the interpreter that please tell His Excellency that I have been in politics all my life and he doesn't need to tell me what I should do or what India should do. And the interpreter was so scared about it, he refused to interpret that line. So that person can be anything but a Nazi sympathizer.
Okay, one quick last question. I think the time's up, and then we'll, ask the audience to throw their questions at you, Chandrachur. So, how different do you think the political scenario of India would have been if Netaji had a successful political career in India, if he lived and was one of the four most
Well,
political
I
leaders.
personally believe, Moa, is that first thing, in all probability, India would not have been partitioned if he had come back in 1945 or 46 even. There would have been no partition of India because, and that is very clear from a statement of the former president of Bangladesh, Mujibur Rahman. Mujibur Rahman was a young leader of Muslim League at that time. And later he wrote in his autobiography that as a Muslim League worker, we used to listen to Subhas Bose's broadcast from Southeast Asia. And we used to love listening to his speeches, but it always created a dilemma in our minds. We wanted the man to come back and take charge of India. But then we were also concerned that if he comes back, then there will be no Pakistan. So should we have him back or should we not? So that was the dilemma. And that same dilemma was also resolved by Subhas Bose in the INA. The INA was also split along communal lines, the first INA. And a lot of Muslim officers had refused to join initially, and then later they joined because they felt that they were being left out. So as a community, they wanted representation, so they joined the INA. But when Subhas Bose came, that is when they realized, and these are all statements on record in the INA trials in Red Fort, that's the first time they realized that this was a national army, truly national army. This was not a Hindu army or a Sikh army or a Muslim army. It was Indian national army. So that man would not have let partition happen. And he had the capability to rally people around him, behind him. And that time his image was sky high. He was towering above everyone else at that time when the people of India got to know about INA and all. So he would not have let that happen. Secondly, India would have been much more stronger in terms of its geopolitical positioning, not kind of non-aligned, soft positioning, but it would have looked at self-interest first. India would have had a stronger army. India would have focused much more on removing the social evils of illiteracy, casteism, lack of hygiene, health, poverty, all these things. So my belief, people can accuse me of being biased towards Bose because I've written about him, but my belief, my understanding, it's not only belief, but my understanding is that what Pandit Nehru did, Subhas Bose would have gone a few steps ahead with a bit more stronger programs and a clearer attitude. He had definitely had a clearer attitude than Pandit Nehru, and the will to execute his plans, that was much stronger in him. Pandit Nehru was kind of torn between camps, which was not the case with Subhas. So, India would have been, my sense in brief, because there is no time to go into the details, would have been a better place.
Okay, so if we could have some questions from the audience.
In the beginning of your talk, you had said, in the beginning of your talk, you had said that, you can hear me?
I can hear you. Please.
In the beginning of your talk, you said that secrecy, the government maintained a lot of secrecy around bringing out into the open his writings. He had said his only 3,000 words.
Not only writings, but a lot of stuff. Information on him.
Information on him. Why is that so? Today's government, why should they be afraid of, and who should they be afraid of? Why should they want not to remove that veil of secrecy around him? What is the intention?
Okay.
Then another quick question is, you had said during the course of your talk recently, in fact towards the end, you had said that Mahatma Gandhi could not stand Subhash Chandra Bose towards the end, so he was removed. They could not coexist together. But I think later on he had said somewhere that it would have been great if he had become the Prime Minister of India. The history of the nation would have changed. I think he has said that also. So these two are contradictory.
Okay, let me answer your questions. First is there was a lot of secrecy on Netaji. Now, as we stand today, most of the files have been declassified. Most of the information is out. There are only a few files, sensitive files, which are still under wraps, and those mostly belong to the intelligence category. And they, again, not so much about Subhas Bose's life or activities, but more about his disappearance mystery, not about his life or activity. Those have been declassified, though they are largely in the public domain. But they are scattered. So I actually have started a petition asking the government of India to publish properly his collected works, which includes everything around the world in private collection, in foreign archives. They should be brought together and published in a comprehensive volume, which removes this distortion. As I said, 1/10 of Gandhiji's and 1/3 of Panditji's. That distortion should not be there, and it can be easily removed by any concerted effort, by the serious effort by the government. The secrecy that remains is now confined only to his disappearance and not on his life and activities. On your second question, sir, I am sorry, but I have never come across such statement by Mahatma Gandhi, so I'm afraid I will not be able to answer that question.
Was it?
It was a wonderful experience talking about Netaji, and thanks particularly to Pravakaitan Foundation for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to so many interested and very intelligent readership. It's reading, and good readers are a rarity these days. So it was a very pleasant afternoon, and really gave me a lot of ideas, and the questions were very stimulating, and the discussion was very, very thought-provoking. So I really enjoyed the afternoon here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Pravakaitan Foundation, for organizing this.